The rivalry is back on.
The horseshoe is back.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, as always, Cody Felger. So happy to have you joining us. Joining me, as always, the amazing Derek Larger. Derek, it was a good weekend of football for you, man. Ohio State was victorious, and obviously the Colts were victorious on Sunday, squeaking out a victory to the Denver Broncos last minute, 15-13. Derek, beyond football, man, how was your weekend?
Weekend was pretty good for me. Really busy Saturday. Had to work in the morning and then drive 2 hours back to my parents' place. Mentioned it earlier in the week how, I was going to be moving the rest of my stuff out of my family's house and moving into the temporary house. Had a whole bunch of family and family friends come over and help put everything together. And like you mentioned, we ended up watching the Ohio State game. Ohio State, again, looking like the best team in the country. And then I fell asleep really early that day. I didn't even stay up to watch the Michigan-Notre Dame game. I basically fell asleep at 7 o'clock while half the family was still at the house. And I didn't wake up until almost 11 the next day. I was so exhausted. But other than that, I basically just said goodbye to the house one last time and just packed some stuff up and got ready to go and, just got ready to start a new chapter in the life with my family, just away from that house, and obviously watch some good football. So overall, it was a pretty good weekend.
Yeah, you should consider yourself lucky you didn't watch that Notre Dame-Michigan game. I was actually at that game. A buddy of mine and I live up here in South Bend, and we decided that we were going to forego a game a couple weeks ago to go to this game. We got really good seats. I think we were in the south end zone and the 7th row, so it was really, really good seats. And it was just miserable out. Apparently in the big house, we bought an umbrella, and it was a big deal. It was $15 umbrella, but they don't allow umbrellas, so everybody has to wear a poncho, and if you don't wear a poncho, you're basically screwed. And so luckily for us, we bought ponchos and stuff, but we still were soaking wet. It was a steady rain. I wouldn't say it was pouring, but there was a steady rain throughout. And at one point, our feet were completely soaked. My friend made the terrible mistake of wearing jeans, and so his jeans were stuck to his body after he was trying to get them off. He was telling me, and yeah, we were basically just standing in water the whole time, freezing cold. It was awful. And also, being a Notre Dame fan, it was terrible. Notre Dame just looked like they looked like the 2011 Colts. They just looked incompetent, beyond incompetent. Couldn't get anything going all day offensively. They couldn't stop the run. It was just a miserable weekend. But fortunately, the Colts pulled through. My fantasy team pulled through, which was good. But really, I went to that game. We went on Friday evening. So I went up and visited my girlfriend. She lives in Kalamazoo, which is about an hour away from South Bend. And then from there, we met up in Kalamazoo. We drove to Ann Arbor, which is about a couple hours away from there. Friday night, we went up. We rented a hotel, and we stayed there. And then Saturday, we just kind of hung out until the game at 7. And it was starting to rain at that time. We were just oh my word. My friend actually made the comment. He was like, man, if this was a game in South Bend, I would have sold my tickets and just watched it from home. But we were committed at that point, so we stuck it out and almost considered leaving at halftime just because it was ugly already. It was raining. My friend was shivering, and I was cold, and it was just miserable out. But, we could check that one off the bucket list. We did it. I don't know if I'd ever want to do it again. But overall, man, it was a good weekend, and thank God the Colts pulled out a victory, even though it was a lot closer than I think we initially thought it would be. The Colts right now sitting there at 5-2, top of their division still, so that's always good.
Yeah, tell me about it. I think we all kind of forgot to mention the fact that we looked at Denver's record and we just assumed, they're really not that amazing, but we kind of forgot that Denver overall had a top 5 defense in the league. They certainly showed it. The Colts certainly didn't, blow this game out with, big plays or making a whole lot of terrible turnovers. They moved the ball down the field quite well. A lot of times they didn't quite convert in the situations they needed to convert in. And that's ultimately the story of the offense there. And we'll obviously get more into details here of who was the biggest to blame for why this game got to be so close. But I mean, Cody, there's a lot of things that you could point to this game as to why the Colts really let this game stay close. And I think this is the biggest one that everyone's been talking about. I think we can start talking about Rock Ya-Sin here. Obviously deserves criticism. He definitely laid a goose egg in this game. He was not doing anything at all to cover Courtland Sutton, and they exposed him all game for that. But I mean, the players said it, and I think we're starting to realize it, that, you know, he's a rookie and that things are going to happen and that he's not going to be on the level of a Darius Leonard or a Malik Hooker or guys like that have been in the system for a little bit longer. I mean, he's going to make mistakes. I don't understand why people can't understand that. He's a rookie. He's a rookie. Stuff happens, and even the best of professionals have terrible games. And I don't know. What were your thoughts about who is most to blame here? Because you could point to a couple different things.
Yeah, and to just talk about Rock Ya-Sin, not a good day for the second-round Temple product. I think he had 5 pass interference calls against Courtland Sutton all day. Kind of got burned with Pierre Desir not starting and not playing at all, actually. And so it was a rough game. But, you know, I watched an interview from Malik Hooker. Like, you just got to shake it off in this league. Like, sometimes you'll have bad games. But you just got to shake it off, and you got to continue to press forward. And we know, Rock Ya-Sin's a rookie, still got a lot to learn, obviously. But, Malik Hooker pointed to it. He said, man, that's how this league is. Like, and we saw Rock Ya-Sin's a talented player. Like, we saw in training camp that freak interception in training camp against Devin Funchess. Like, that's the kind of player the Colts are getting. And, yeah, he's a rookie, and, yeah, there's still things to clean up for sure. And it wasn't a good day. It was definitely a forgettable day for Mr. Rock Ya-Sin. But, I mean, man, overall, like, this stuff happens. Like, and it's no excuse. Rock Ya-Sin's a professional. I know that he'll do all he can to be better for the next game. But, this stuff happens. And Courtland Sutton's a good player. My fantasy team knows that. He's a good player. And But, no, man, overall, I thought the defense pretty much held their own and was to be expected against really not a very good Denver offense at all. I thought they had their moments where, they need to clean a few things up. But, overall, I thought the defense did its job. The offense, I think, is more to blame here than anything. Kind of laid a little bit of a goose egg until Jacoby Brissett kind of made, that insane play, which we'll get to. That insane play when he had Von Miller draped all over him and completes a 30, 40-yard bomb to T.Y. Hilton down the field. But overall, man, the offense didn't have a great day outside of Marlon Mack, who I think had over 70 yards. The offense really didn't look very good, specifically that offensive line. I think Jacoby Brissett was sacked 4 times. So a forgettable day on offense overall. And, for some position groups that's usually the strength of the team in the offensive line, it was definitely a forgettable day against Von Miller and company.
Yeah, and, it's one of those things. Denver always has a pretty decent defense, like I mentioned earlier. And I feel like I have to keep telling people every single week of the same thing here, that the NFL is full of professionals, okay? This isn't college where the Indianapolis Colts are Ohio State and Denver is like Temple. There's not that giant gap difference in talent. There really isn't. I mean, there's obviously a level there, but ultimately these are all professional athletes, and the defensive coordinators and the offensive coordinators, everybody has a job, and ultimately the Denver Broncos did what they needed to do to win this game. I would turn Twitter off yesterday or Sunday because I could not for the life of me see so many fans just already calling losses in the second quarter before this game is even over. I mean, everybody knows who they are. That was pathetic, some of the fans there. I mean, it is ridiculous. I mean, I saw people saying, we need to pack this season up and this whole thing needs to be just reset now because, we're losing 6-0 against the Denver Broncos in the second quarter. I mean, good Lord, people. I don't understand your concept here. I mean, the Colts are 5-2. Do we not forget that? The Colts are 5-2. Tell me what realistic Colts fan here thought after losing Andrew Luck that we were going to be 5-2 through the first 8 weeks of the season. Please tell me who actually legit thought we would do that. At this point of the last year, we were 2-5 at last 8 weeks of the season for last year with Andrew Luck. Right now, we're playing at a great level. We're not winning games the way we wish we would, but ultimately, this is the NFL. You win games. Oftentimes, you win them close. I mean, it just ultimately, that's how it is. And let me tell you something. If Vinatieri had missed that field goal at the end of that game, I promise you there would be a petition amongst the Colts fan base saying Vinatieri needs to just be kicked out of the NFL tomorrow. I mean, it was another awful game for him other than that kick. Missed the field goal, missed an extra point. The extra point that would have tied the game up in the fourth quarter had he actually made it, and then left us struggling to get one more point for the rest of the game, and obviously missed the field goal early in the game, and obviously made the 50-yarder to win the game, where everybody obviously kind of forgets the bad stuff and remembers the good things, right? This is certainly a game on the offense and special teams side that you can certainly just forget about. I mean, this is a game that you really don't want to think about, and you just want to reset and get back to where you were, because nobody on the offensive side really did any good other than Marlon Mack. But let me just say this, Cody, for as much crap as Rock Ya-Sin was taken for his performance Sunday, I gotta be honest, I'm impressed with what the defense was able to do overall throughout that game. I mean, most people, they'll look at the score and say, oh, we gave up 13, but I mean, they gave up a touchdown in the first drive of the second half, and other than that, they didn't give up anything in the second half. The defense just figured it out, and minus Rock Ya-Sin, the rest of the defense seemed pretty crisp so far. So what were your thoughts on the overall defense other than obviously Rock Ya-Sin having a bad day?
Yeah, man. And before I get to that, I have to say it's kind of funny to me seeing all the overreactions from fans on Twitter. I typically don't try to get on Twitter so much on Sundays just because I know it's bound to be a bunch of overreactions. But it's kind of ironic to me that, the Colts are arguably coming off their two biggest wins of the season. Not arguably, they are coming off the two biggest wins of their season. Obviously traveling to Arrowhead, beating Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, and then, hosting Houston for the division lead and winning. And it's kind of funny, man, down 6-0. Obviously it's not what you want. But, it's in the second quarter. Like, you're down 6-0 to the Broncos, not what you want, but, come on, you still have plenty of time. You have a whole nother half to win the game, and it's just kind of crazy to think people would overreact after seeing the Colts back-to-back weeks winning huge games that, honestly, we didn't think that they would even win maybe one of those games. It's kind of crazy to me, but in regards to, the defense, I thought the defense overall has played really good. Really since that Kansas City game, after that Oakland game, I think it kind of was a wake-up call for this defense. And we always knew they had a lot of talent, especially this year. They drafted a bunch of guys on defense. I think really outside of the 7th round, Paris Campbell was the only guy they drafted on offense. And so this defense is starting to realize more and more, and they have a lot of second and third year players who are starting to come on. And overall, I was impressed by the defense. They had the one drive you mentioned, the second half, where they allowed the Broncos to drive down and score. That wasn't very good, but other than that, man, they pitched a shutout really. And as far as touchdowns are concerned, the first half and then the rest of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, I mean, they held their own pretty well, and you should against a team like the Broncos. I mean, you should. I don't want to discredit this defense, but Denver's offense stinks, and we know that. Their defense, on the other hand, that's a different story. We saw that yesterday. But, man, overall, I was impressed with the defense, and really I've been impressed at what this defense has been able to do over the last 3 weeks. I think they've really held their own, and it's crazy to me because I was talking to one of my friends who's a Patriots fan, and he was saying, yeah, the Colts, they have a good running game and they have a good defense. And I just had to stop and be like, well, you're right, actually. That's weird for me to think about the Colts having a good defense, but they do. They really do. Their defense has been stellar so far in the last 3 weeks. And, obviously Rocky Sin had a rough game, but, they were missing Pierre Desir, and for whatever reason, Quincy Wilson wasn't starting, wasn't even dressing. But they still were able to hold their own against Denver, and I thought they really kept the Colts in it the whole time. And, if that offense would have scored a little bit more, it probably would have been a not such close game, but it is what it is. That's what happens. But, man, overall, I was impressed by that defense. I've been impressed with that defense for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, the defense has definitely stepped up their game. They certainly have basically made the motto of the bend, don't break. And later in the games, they get so much better. They do so much better later on, and they step up in the big situations when it matters, right? And I guess it's kind of funny that we kind of switched to the opposite side of the ball here where, the defense really stepped up big, but the one issue that we had was the offensive line. Really hard to really just sit back and say, wow, the Colts offensive line got smacked. That's so odd because I don't think we've seen the whole offensive line just get destroyed like that before. It wasn't just one single player. It was everybody. Costanzo was getting it. Quentin Nelson was getting the work. And obviously Braden Smith was having his hands full having to guard Von Miller all game. Von Miller, we all kind of forget. Von Miller is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL when he wants to be. And certainly over the last few weeks, he's been that. And we just kind of forget that. And this Denver defense definitely did their part in, making sure that the Colts really didn't have anything easy to go with. Jacoby Brissett went 15 of 25 for 200 yards. And obviously Marlon Mack had 19 runs for 76 yards and a touchdown. But I think a lot of those numbers can be kind of deceiving too, because a couple of runs early in the game, Marlon Mack, I think, had 26 yards rushing on the first drive of the game. And, he had a few rushes here and there where it was, 14 yards or 12 yards. But other than that, he really wasn't getting anything. So even those numbers can be a little misconstrued when you look at the overall effectiveness of him running the football. I got to give credit to Denver's defense. Let's face it here. They're an average offense away from being an actual AFC playoff contender here, because if they had an average quarterback and they had average receivers, which they already have one, they already have a above average wide receiver in Cortland Sutton, and they have pretty decent running backs too, a mixture of those. I'm telling you, if they had a quarterback like a Jacoby Brissett that had the ability to make things happen like that, this Denver Broncos team would be right in the mix, because they already have a great defense. And I got to give props to Denver for making this a game the way it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Vic Fangio, I think we forget, Vic Fangio is a very good defensive mind. And so I think the start of the season was kind of deceiving because Denver didn't really get any sacks to start the season. And it was kind of weird. It was just it's Vic Fangio's defense, though. They should be dominating. And I think they've really started to find their own. They've really, I was going to look at their schedule really fast. I think there's a lot of games, besides that Kansas City game on Thursday night that, Denver's been in a lot of games where they've kept it close to one or two possession games. And yeah, it's interesting, man, because, I think Denver's won 2 games so far, but really if a couple games go their way, they're right in that playoff mix. You're right. And, they have a really top tier defense. Like we've talked about, we were trying to get the preview out. I forgot to mention this. You're trying to get the preview out for this game. And then my computer decided that, sorry, you're not going to get this out. I'm going to completely crap out on you. And so, it's been a couple day process of getting this back to where I want it to be, and had to make a couple updates and stuff, and now we're good. But anyways, in our preview, we talked about, man, this Denver secondary is really, really good. They have Chris Harris, who we talked about, is a really, really good corner who might be on the trade market, but he's still a very good player. They have that Simmons kid who's a very good safety, probably one of the best safeties in the league right now. They've just got a lot of good players in their secondary, and I think that in the wake of a two-win season so far, you can kind of forget that. But overall, man, Denver's defense, they are not a joke at all, and I think that's what we've seen. And the fact that the Colts were able to pull this one out, I even said in the preview, I think it's going to be a lot closer game than we think it's going to be, just because I just know how good Denver's defense has been over the years. It's just that defense really kept them in this game overall. The offense wasn't doing them any favors like normal, but this defense, they are legit, and I think that's something that can't be forgotten. This defense is for real. They're legit, and if they had, even if they had a decent quarterback, right? If they had a Jacoby Brissett or whoever, I think that they would be right in the playoff mix as well, because that defense is legit.
Yeah, definitely. And going off of the defense here and making big plays, let's talk about Brissett here real quick, because I know people are going to want to say, oh, he didn't do anything all game, everything, blah, 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 blah. I really don't care. He had a better game. He had a better game against Denver than he did against Kansas City, but yet for some reason we never mentioned how bad Jacoby Brissett was in that game. But now all of a sudden we're going to talk crap about him in this game when he actually faced a legit defense. I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm going to give him credit for what he did in that final drive. I don't think people quite realize, dare I say it, how Andrew Luck-esque that was. I mean, if you go back to the Dolphins game last year, just look at the comparisons of it. Andrew Luck was able to shed a sheer sack, find his way around the tackles, throw a bomb to Chester Rogers 30 yards down the field, and that put us in position for a field goal to win that game. Sure enough, Jacoby Brissett backed up in his own 10-yard line. It somehow avoids the Von Miller sack. Of all people to avoid sacks from, Von Miller is one of the last few people you expect to do that. And then to be able to get out of the tackle's reach and be able to find T.Y. Hilton on the edge of the sideline for a 35-yard gain. Talk about a MVP caliber play. That is what you get paid for, and that's what Jacoby Brissett needed to do. It just was so beautiful, and it put the Colts in such a good spot to be able to win the game. I'll tell you, when I watched it on fantasy, because I wasn't able to watch the game, unfortunately, we were having Wi-Fi issues with my laptop at the new house that we were moving into. I couldn't watch it from the Wi-Fi, but I was able to look at it on fantasy and was able to see, I saw that play, how they got 35 yards. I'm like, there's no way that's real. And sure enough, it was. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, the Colts are actually going to do this. I didn't know if the Colts offense was going to have enough to do it, but in the biggest moments, they came in big, and when they needed to score to win the game, Jacoby Brissett and that offense did what they needed to do.
They did. And, man, it must be something about those Color Rush uniforms. I mean, the Colts played the Dolphins last year. Color Rush, Andrew Luck makes that play. Play the Broncos, Color Rush. Jacoby Brissett makes that play. That was a potentially very scary play because he was in the end zone. Like, Jacoby Brissett was in the end zone getting tackled by Von Miller, who had already had a sack at that point. And, yeah, and man, just, and we've heard, people have said Jacoby Brissett's such a hard quarterback to tackle, and we saw it. I don't know how he even escaped that because Von Miller's no joke of a pass rusher, but the fact that he was able to not only avoid that sack, but throw on the run, so many yards down the field to T.Y. Hilton, I mean, that was a huge game-changing play. It's so crazy how eerily similar that was to that Andrew Luck play last year against the Dolphins. And, man, it must be the Color Rush uniforms. I don't know what else to say at this point. That was absolutely nuts. If you haven't watched that play, I want you guys to watch that play because it's amazing. And yeah, Derek, like you said, big time players make big time plays, and it was a rough day for Brissett and company. But when it mattered the most, the Colts offense did what they needed to do, and Jacoby Brissett did what he needed to do, and that's a big reason why the Colts are sitting still at 5-2 atop the AFC South.
That's right. The Colts are still sitting atop the AFC South. So, again, Colts fans, you can keep hating on this team. You can hate how we're winning games, however you want to. I really don't care. I would never have imagined that the Colts would have been able to be at top of the AFC South and be the number 2 seed in all of the AFC right now. Number 2 seed. Think about that. Nobody thought that was going to be an option when Andrew Luck went down. Nobody. So to be in that position right now, regardless of how we've been winning games, ultimately it's all about winning. It doesn't matter how you win them. It's if you win them. And that's what we're doing right now. It's really good to see. And again, there's still more stuff that the Colts need to figure out. They're going to have to learn to become more consistent, especially on offense. And like we mentioned earlier, a few more injuries on the defense that, we didn't necessarily see coming into this. We kind of didn't expect Pierre Desir to be, brought down the way he was. At least Kenny Moore was around, but ultimately, again, Pierre Desir was supposed to be the guy to cover Cortland Sutton, and that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, I'm just glad the Colts won, man. That made my drive back to Kentucky so much better.
Oh, yeah. And also a shout-out, man, to a guy we said had to really step it up in Kamoko Ture's absence, Ben Banogu. He had that. How about that last strip sack to end the game for the Colts? And he really stepped up. I think he had another sack that was erased by a penalty, but overall, Ben Banogu had a really good day, getting after the pass rush or getting after the passer, and that's something I'm going to continue to watch and monitor. Can Ben Banogu continue, to provide pressure and really step up and fill that void that was left by Kamoko Ture? And that was a good positive step to see for the rookie second round pick out of TCU. Ben Banogu had a really good day, and some of these young Colts defenders have just been looking really good so far. I know Kari Willis, I think, was injured, so that'll be worth monitoring, the other rookie fourth-round pick this year. And so, overall, man, this defense has been really good. I think a lot of those young players have stepped up and played pivotal roles so far, and to be determined if Ben Banogu is going to continue to do that. But, man, overall, it was a good day for the Colts defense, and it's kind of crazy to think, man, this Colts defense now has won them games. Not just one game, and multiple games this year. You think that Kansas City game. You think some of the other games, like this Denver game, there are some games this Colts defense has won, basically them. Like, they've held their own the whole game. And it's really encouraging to see, especially from a unit, man, that a couple weeks ago just really got shredded by the Raiders. It's good to see this defense finally finding their niche a little bit. They play Pittsburgh next week. Mason Rudolph is back. I think he's playing on Monday Night Football. So if he doesn't get injured again, the Colts will see Mason Rudolph and the Steelers on Sunday. And it'll be an interesting test for the Colts because, Pittsburgh has a pretty good defense. And so it'll be interesting to see, can the Colts kind of shake off the rust from last week's game and really, find their mojo again on offense. That's going to be interesting to see, on Sunday this next week, and see if the Colts can go 6-2.
Yep, that's pretty much it. I mean, you pretty much hit everything there. The Colts are definitely going to have a decent challenge against the Steelers. I mean, people are going to say, "Oh, the Steelers not that great," but they got a decent run game now. They figured out how to run the football with James Conner. Mason Rudolph hasn't been really turning the ball over the way that Jacoby Brissett has most of the year. That hasn't been making a lot of the dumb throws. And this Pittsburgh defense has looked really good. They're young and they're agile, just exactly like the Colts are. They really are a lot like the Colts in that aspect. The Colts are a better coached team, I think, and they're a much more organized group, and they're more talented on the offensive side when it comes to Jacoby Brissett specifically and the offensive line and things of that nature. But this Pittsburgh team does resemble a lot of what Indianapolis is. They want to run the football. They're not going to go crazy with the offensive scheme and try to overwhelm Mason Rudolph. And their defense has been keeping them in ball games. So it will be a great test to see if the Colts can learn from this Denver game and learn those lessons and get back to playing winning football again.
It will be, and it's always good to come off and learn from a win rather than a loss. I know losses teach you a lot, but it's always nice to realize, okay, we made all these mistakes, but we still were able to win. We're still good enough to win. That has to be a positive sign for the Colts moving forward. They know they have a lot to work on, but they have a week to prepare for Pittsburgh, and it'll be interesting to see, can they handle their stuff against a pretty solid Pittsburgh team that's fundamentally built pretty similar to the Colts, like you mentioned. And I'm going to be interesting to see, can they slow down James Conner? Can they get on this defense early? And I think one thing, Derek, that they have to do if they want to win against Pittsburgh, and we'll talk about this more on our preview podcast, but this is something that they didn't do very well against the Raiders, and something they really didn't do very well against the Broncos, is they can't give a team like that hope. They can't give a team like that hope. They have to jump on them early, and they have to basically, those teams with not such great records, they just have to play like they're the number 2 right now seed in the AFC. They have to play like that. And that's something that we're going to see. And I know Adam Vinatieri was on with Pat McAfee kind of talking about, man, the great teams are the teams that can dominate through 4 quarters. And that's something that we've harped on time and time again. The Colts need to dominate the teams that they should dominate. But this Pittsburgh team's no joke. So it'll be interesting to see on Sunday who comes victorious. And, man, if the Colts can continue their push to potentially get a bye in the AFC playoffs, how crazy would it be, though, to think about that? Like, the Colts, without Andrew Luck, got the number 2 seed behind New England and get a first-round bye. Like, that's just absolutely wild to me to even think about.
Yeah, that is crazy. I don't even know how you could even put that into words. I mean, considering we didn't even know if we'd make the playoffs with Jacoby Brissett to start, let alone be in consideration to get that number 2 seed, is crazy. And you're right, that when it comes to how the Colts play, they're going to have to get on teams better early. We did that well against the Chiefs, and we did that well against the Texans. It just seems odd that, every time we face a team that we feel like we should win, they just come out flat offensively to start the game. And it really is that way. And obviously, I don't think the Colts were prepared for how good Denver actually was. I think they were coming in there thinking we were going to stomp these guys and they were going to be just fine, but they got another lesson from that. So you're right, Cody. That's just one thing this team's got to do better at. They just got to do better at understanding the circumstances. They got to do better getting started earlier. And if they can do that, they'll start winning these games and not feel like they have to win it by the last drive of the game.
Yeah, definitely. If you're a Colts fan at this point, about every game this year has been a one-possession game. So if you're Arkansas State, still take it. The Colts have a lot more games left this season. But you're right, Derek. The Colts have to start off strong against these teams that they really should. And, there's a potential right now, man, to win the rest of their games really until that Saints game. All those games are winnable, and the Colts should be favored in all of those games. And so the key is, can the Colts win when they need to win, and can they win big when they need to win big? Because I think that'll go a long way for the confidence of this young team. And again, they are a very young team outside of a few players, Justin Houston, Jabal Sheard, and Adam Vinatieri. I mean, this Colts team, I guess T.Y. Hilton technically qualifies, and Jack Doyle, they're 30 or close to 30. But overall, man, the nucleus of this team is very young. And we've talked about this. We talked about this even last year. There's, with young teams, there's going to be a lot of mistakes that happen. You just got to get better. And we saw that last year with the Colts. They got really better. They got really hot at the end of the year. They went on that major win streak and made the playoffs. And so, with this young team, it's going to be interesting to see, can they continue to shore up, continue to be better, be consistent. And if they can, man, I think they have a good shot at, being a very high seed in the playoffs. But that's really the determining factor for me. Can you win the games that you need to win, and can you dominate a game? Can you not overlook any team? And that I don't know if the Colts have necessarily done that, but there have been times where I'm like, man, I feel like you should be winning by a lot more against this team. They're not a good football team. Right. You just can't play to the competition that you're playing against, no matter if it's Houston, New England, Kansas City, or if it's Denver, Oakland, those kind of teams. You can't play to the competition. And that's something the Colts are going to have to continue to learn with time. And I think they'll get it right. I think they'll right the ship. I think Frank Reich's a good coach, and they'll be fine. But that's just something that they have to do if they want to be a top team and a Super Bowl contender this year.
You're absolutely right, Cody. And Colts fans, pay attention here real quick, okay? Understand this circumstance. just embrace this now. Just understand it will take some time. Take a little bit more time. Let's not forget that most of this nucleus, other than, some of the older veterans, a lot of these guys are, second year guys, second or third year. They're youngins. Even Malik Hooker, who a lot of people don't even bring up in the young nucleus, he's young. He's only in his third year now. So it's like, you got to understand it's still really early in the rehabilitation process. It's coming along. It's just still early. Just understand the growing pains now. Just know in about 3 years from now, this team is going to be dominant. In 3 years, I'm marking it down. You understand this team is going to compete for a Super Bowl every year for the next 5 to 10 years with this nucleus. And my friend was asking me the other day about whether or not is Chris Ballard going to fork up any cash for, guys like Quentin Nelson and Eric Ebron and stuff like that. I said, you're damn right he's going to. Of course he's going to pay guys like that. Quentin Nelson, Darius Leonard, Malik Hooker, Eric Ebron. We still got to keep looking, but I still think he's headed in the right direction, and I think that Ballard really likes the guy. I mean, of course Ballard's going to do that, but there's a reason he hasn't done it yet, because he's trying to make sure that he's getting the guys that he brings into his system and he's paying them. I mean, people keep forgetting they just made Kenny Moore the richest slot corner in all football. I mean, people kind of forget that. Pierre Desir got an extension. Ryan Kelly got an extension. You got Kenny Moore that got one. I mean, these guys are getting extensions. Don't get me wrong, they're getting extensions. We're just not giving anybody the big bucks yet because most of our guys are still young, still on their rookie deals. And here in the next year or two, you're going to start seeing Ballard start dishing this money out, man. He's going to start dishing this stuff out to Darius Leonard and Quentin Nelson and other guys on the offensive line. Heck, right now, if Anthony Costanzo wasn't 30 years old, we would be throwing a blank check out to him right now. Because Anthony Costanzo and Quentin Nelson are the best left tackle, left guard combo in all of the NFL. I mean, we just have to pump the brakes here, Colts fans. Just remember, this team is still very young. And they're still inexperienced in a lot of different ways. But the more they keep playing, the more they get used to this adversity. To tell you the truth right now, Cody, I am more than okay having the Colts winning games like this. I'm more than happy with it. Because what these kinds of games teach you is how to deal with adversity. You don't learn adversity from destroying teams by 40 points every game. Unless, of course, you're beating a very good team. But the Colts are learning how to deal with adversity by winning these really close games. You learn that it's psychological. It makes you think we can stick with anyone. Even if we're losing all game, we're getting our butts kicked, we can still win this game. And that's what I enjoy, is that the Colts have that mentality and they're going to be able to do well with that mentality. I mean, New England at one point is going to get cocky, maybe at some point, and they'll get trounced because they'll start to get cocky, and then they'll realize they made a mistake until it's too late. So, again, Colts fans, let's just kind of just take this with a grain of salt. We obviously need a lot more to improve, but just know in a few years this is going to get better.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, Derek, and I wanted to touch on that. Those tight, close games, like obviously Denver, you don't really want that to happen, but it happened and you were victorious. But, I mean, that's kind of how the playoffs are, man. Like, the playoffs, you're not going to normally, unless you're, Peyton Manning against the Broncos 2004, you're not going to blow teams out in the playoffs. They're going to be close, tight games. And yes, Denver's not a team that you'll see in the playoffs, but, you'll probably see a Kansas City. You'll probably see a Houston, honestly. You'll see a New England potentially. Like, you'll see some of those teams. And if you have the confidence that, man, we can hang with any team, and if you can win games tight, and if you can get that experience now, especially with this young nucleus, and you can figure out ways to win, yeah, it may not be the prettiest game, but if you can figure out, it doesn't matter if we're playing our best football or if we're just sloppy all game, we don't feel like we really deserved it, but we're still victorious. Those are valuable wins. I agree with you, Derek. Those are valuable wins, and the Colts are learning how, yes, they're making mistakes. Yes, it's not ideal, but man, since last October, the Colts are the third best team record-wise. They're 14-3 since that happened. And, the Colts have already had 2 losses this year. So, the Colts right now are one of the hottest teams in the league. Number 2 in the AFC, not in the AFC South, in the AFC. They're number 2 record-wise right now. And they're very young, and they're still making mistakes. They're still growing together, but it's better to grow and win and have that culture of winning than to go, win 4 or 5 games each year, get high draft picks, and never figure out how to win. Like I would rather win these tight games, and go 11-5, 12-4 than to blow out a few teams and not make the playoffs. I think anybody would. I think you'd be an idiot to say otherwise, but. I think, Derek, overall, man, it's a very, very valuable thing to have. The Colts, every game this year has been basically a one-possession game. And we saw that in that Chargers game. How did the Colts lose to the Chargers? I still don't understand that. But anyways, we've already talked about that. So I don't want to open that can of worms again. But anyways, you saw that first game. It was a tight game. The Colts were down the entire game, and they came and tied it back up, and they didn't win the game. And then you saw yesterday the Colts were down basically the entire game, and they proved that they can win when from behind. And the Colts have also proven that they can compete and beat some of the best teams in the league in the AFC. And so, man, overall, it's very valuable for the Colts to win these games. Yes, it's not ideal from a fan standpoint. From a heart standpoint, I know our hearts are beating, and you can get a little frustrated, and I understand that, but man, these are some wins, and a win's a win in the NFL. It doesn't matter how you do it. As long as you're victorious, man, it doesn't matter. I know as Colts fans, we've been spoiled for years, and I was just thinking about this the other day. So I believe it was 2009 when the Colts were really, really good. They started off 14-0. They had basically the best offense in the league. Dallas Clark had 100 catches, and I remember when I was thinking that, I was like, oh yeah, he's pretty good, but I didn't realize fully how good that 2009 Colts team was, that offensive team. It was absolutely wild, and I think as Colts fans, we've been spoiled for so long because we expect our quarterback to be the MVP, and now the fact that Jacoby Brissett's been good for the Colts, he's been serviceable, I would say better than serviceable for the Colts. But that's not how they're winning games, and it's just weird, especially having years of Andrew Luck, and then coming off of that, years of Peyton Manning. It's just a new formula to win, and it's just weird now, coming from a team that really, when you thought of the Colts for so long, ever since I was a fan, you thought they pass the ball and that's how they win the game. They have an elite quarterback, and the fact is they have a good quarterback, but they don't have an elite quarterback, and that's okay. That's how some teams have won, right? That's how some teams have won in the past. You run the ball, you play good defense, and obviously Jacoby Brissett's in his first full year as the Colts' entrenched starter for the near future, and so he's still growing and learning. And but man, overall, it's good for this Colts team. It really is, and I can't wait to see how this team continues to grow. They're a young team, like we mentioned. They're going to make mistakes, but overall, man, if they're making mistakes and still winning, I can't complain.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth there. I can't really complain too much about what's going on with this season right now. I'm just looking forward to what this season has to offer still. Look forward to seeing Jacoby Brissett continue to progress, seeing this offense and this defense progress, seeing if the coaches can adjust, and I can't wait to see where this season's going.
And with that, I think that wraps up this podcast, and we'll probably come out with a Colts Steelers preview later on this week. I'm thinking probably Thursday or Friday we'll drop that. We'll probably record Thursday. We normally record on Thursday, and then we post it on Friday. So that's going to be a pretty good game. It'll be an interesting game to see how the Colts handle the Steelers. So be sure to check in on that in a couple days. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the game, and also what you think the Colts should improve on if they would want to continue to be a good team in the AFC. So with that, and for Derek and myself, thank you guys, and go Colts.